All of you understand by now that everyone who thinks, and will disregard the real mutants and the real fringe areas of life's ordinary flow, but everyone who thinks about change. They may think about it under all sorts of guises, but everyone who thinks, everyone who has an intellect that is operational and they're within spitting distance or rock throwing distance of the bell curve of life, they think about change under all sorts of guises, having plans, feeling like there's some goal to life, whether it be philosophical or religious or just personal, that I want more money, I want a Corvette, I want a new job, I want a new woman, a new man. So that sort of thinking is endogenous, if not indigenous, to the human. A little more specifically, this is still not that far removed from what we were talking about for the last week or so. I want you to consider that just as life is expanding, as you can begin to see it, a few people, in all possible directions, not in the direction that you may have been wired up to think that it was going, or that you thought it should be going, or in ways that you may even thought it had been retreating and was regressing. If you just begin to see it in a certain way without any particular closer examination right now verbally, just as a balloon. In all possible directions you look, and life is expanding, becoming more complex, regardless of any judgment that you may have been wired and primed to have had in the past. It is simply becoming more. Now, in that same way, the individual nervous system, and those in the middle class, in the middle of the bell curve of life's body, they too are expanding, in a sense, in all possible directions. But there is a particular area that we have just hit on here and there that I wanted you to try and see on the basis of what we've been talking about more recently that might have some pertinence, and that is in the nervous system there are particular areas that would appear to have their own particular needs, their own particular hungers for whatever this kind of stuff is, change. And to make it a little more specific, they do not have to be involved with any sort of particular activity. It can be just ordinary people. And yet, if they were asked in a certain way, even they, not unlikely, could be made to agree in some way that there seems to be something sort of missing in life. And they may not take it being a good bricklayer or septic tank manager, maintenance manager. They may not take it as being in some deep philosophical or religious way, but they feel like that there is sort of a piece missing in people's life. And they would say there's kind of a piece left out of my life, and maybe a Corvette might be the cure. Maybe it wouldn't, but what the hell, it's worth a try. I'm going to be here on this planet for another 30 or 40 years, so why not that? That's the first thing that strikes me, because if I get that, then I might be able to dump the old one I'm with now and get a younger one with blonde hair. There is the feeling that there is a piece. Now, to take that a little bit past such a crude chrome and metal level, you might even get non-philosophical, non-academic bricklayers, post-hole diggers, to say that perhaps the Corvette, a car, is not all that might have a salubrious effect on me if they or I knew what salubrious meant. They might say it's not just having the automobile, that it probably is something beyond that. Of course, they knew salubrious, they might say it might even be a kind of transcendental experience, which I'm completely lost, but I'm just repeating what I heard. That having the car may not be it per se. Jesus, I don't even know what that means. But anyway, per se, just having the car may not be it. But that there is something else in life that is like continuing to try and move forward. That maybe me having a car will not change the balance of payments in this country. It may not feed the hungry in the third world, and it may not make me a whole better person, but there seems to be something involved, at least with my dream of owning that car, or else I don't even think that I would get up and go to work every day. I keep thinking about it. If you followed all that beyond the little laughs that we created, that there is a feeling in general humanity, without any particular philosophical name for it, without any particular religious connotation to it, although there can be. I'm just trying to get you to see that nowadays it is even down to the level that you can be somewhat freed from ordinary people, from those kind of religious, in particular philosophical, verbal aspects, and people would just agree with there seems to be always like a missing part, like a piece. And it may be a Corvette, it may not be a Corvette. It may be something that would be on the peripheral. It might be a secondary effect at having that. Or it might be simply that me dreaming of it, and it may be just a piece of crap, like I heard it is, but what the hell, I've got to have some reason to get up, etc. I want you to try and consider taking my arbitrary, capricious, but somewhat useful, ephemeral description of the human nervous system into those three overlapping, intertwined, inseparable areas that I had been calling in the past the lower red circuit, like generally the motor activities of the human organism, and the blue circuit, as I called it, which is getting closer to what they want to think of as being sort of the limbic system within the nervous system, and of course the ever popular upper level, my yellow circuits of the human intellect. Now, while there are people who would seem to be still centered, that would seem to be actively involved with pursuing, being fed by, also feeding one of those areas at the expense of the others, and not forgetting the fact that all of that exists in you, that you have all three of those types generally inside of your own nervous system. Keeping that all in mind, then I wanted to point out that if we did take as archetypical somebody somewhere who was generally, to use what I've already pulled out, a good, middle class, middle of the bell curve at least, bricklayer, a good physically oriented person. Now their feeling beyond anything absolutely material such as a new car, to get them at all, which is not that difficult to do anymore, to get someone such as that who is fairly uneducated in the widest sense of it, them having college education, etc., you could still get them very likely to admit that in life there must be something going on. I don't know what it is, and I don't keep up with my forefathers' religion, but there's got to be some purpose for life, and sometimes I think, well, maybe it's just to try and do better, maybe it's to provide for my children, and I don't know, maybe leave the world a better place. I don't know. If you look at the human nervous system inside of the parameters of my division into the lower and the middle and the upper, the red, the blue, and the yellow circuits all intertwined, what I wanted you to try to see was that each of those areas can be fairly well defined as having its own hunger based upon particular aspects of the general flow of life, such as, I would suggest to you that the feeling, if we were talking about someone who was a exemplary, red circuit dominated, centered person, then their interest, the hunger that life seems to have generated in them to need something like this, whether it's just once a year, once a week, just a little bit, just to think about it, whether it had any particular name or whether it was pursuing a better car, they're still pursuing a piece of something that's missing, the idea of change. I was going to suggest that the red circuit kinds of people, that their basis, if they had to really explain it and could do so verbally, of being interested in this sort of stuff, having no name for it, would be most easily identified as being a fear of death. If you got into people who would seem to be a little more, in the three-dimensional sense, advanced in the general evolution of humanity's nervous system, the yellow circuit-centered people, the blue circuit-centered people, their interest in such as this, again, whether they had any particular name for it or not, but the need, the hunger being generated in their nervous system to find some sort of missing piece, like the question of what's next, where do we go from here, what are we up to in life. Theirs would be based more, as always, this kind of progression, this does not extinguish the fear of death, but now they've got something in addition to it. And theirs would be, more likely, one of my possible descriptions would be just the general dissatisfaction, the general miseries of routine existence. Having the RAs. That's medical terminology. That I won't bore you with it. If you were following into that, of course, in a strictly metaphorical sense, then I would say that you are face to face with a very, or should be, interesting, non-sequential surprise. And that is that there is really no similarly impassioned hunger going on in the ordinary intellect. Again, if you got to be able to do it on your own now, I can't force you to do it verbally, but if you can, for the operational sense of investigating this, if you can in your mind separate what would be the ordinary intellectual operations of the nervous system from the lower, just for this few seconds. Of course, we all know you're supposed to have this continuing knowledge now, or awareness, that the intellect is involved with all the rest of it, or we couldn't even talk about it. That is, the red circuits. The red circuit-centered people could not have a fear of death unless they could think about it. If you can't think about it, if you don't have an intellect, you got no fear of death. It's impossible. And you certainly got no dissatisfaction with life. You might be hungry, you might be horny, you might be cold, but you're not dissatisfied. It's a different thing. And so the intellect is going. But if you can separate it now, after all this time of me describing it in that kind of ad hoc manner, certain ways and for certain purposes, if you look at the intellect itself, if you could remove it right now, just theoretically, from the rest of the operations of the human nervous system, the human organism, there is no passionate hunger of the intellect going, well now, that is comparable to fear of death or just general dissatisfaction with life, of the intellect going, all right, now what's next? Not some great passion, is there? But the greatest passion most people have can be satisfied. And this is not really the majority of people in the middle of the bell curve, but can probably be satisfied by trying to work the Sunday crossword puzzle in the New York Times. I'll probably just chill them right out, cool them off, and everything will be all right. But after having said that part, now we got to circle around where this kind of operations are going on out there in the plains and try and take on some other aspects of it. Take just a general picture of a contemporary, middle of the bell curve, sane, everyday, reasonable, ordinary person. Once that person has exercised, executed, pursued all that is pertinently wired up in them, in their nervous system, that is, they are at their reasonable level of health. And from ordinary views, you might even say that they have made some personal effort. We're not going to stop and argue this because you should know how it is connected to many other things, but an average, sophisticated, up-to-date, with it, man or woman, they've quit smoking, they've cut down cholesterol, or if this week they've picked up on it or increased it, they jog, they've lost weight. So they have done that which would seem to be in the middle of everyday pertinency, red circuit-wise, health-wise. Then if you want to continue with my kind of pictures of the nervous system, blue circuit-wise, we would say that to some degree they have fairly well pursued, practiced, tried to extend whatever innate talents they may have had. That maybe they have taken up crocheting, maybe they have taken up painting on the weekend, maybe they have taken sketching classes, maybe they play air guitar. But the thing is, there seems to be that at that level that they have tried to reach some sort of greater personal fulfillment, as they say out on the left coast. That they have done something. They have taken EST classes, if that's still around. They've gone into group therapy, or they've gone into support groups. They have done the sorts of things that modern people attempt to do. Of course, they do it with a straight face. They're not like you people that laugh every time I bring it up. But here is why I said that I know it's struck you as blank when I started this particular paragraph, when I said that last opening part was sort of wrapped up and take another view. Here's why I said it. With ordinary people, when they have done that if you are now, or if we were talking about some fictitious man or woman I had here, that's just really up to date. They're trim, they don't have any great vices, healthy, they try to pursue certain of their own individual interests, talents. There's a point, and it's reached very quickly. Ordinary people do not realize it. They got no reason to realize it, and they just live out the rest of their life with that kind of continuing. I can't find exactly where it is, that everybody has. That is, their thoughts are always of change, but it gets to the point that you're not sure what to do. The point is, once you have fulfilled, once you have pursued the pertinent wirings, hungers, just everything that was native to you genetically, which I repeat one more time, can happen very quickly. It can happen before you're well into your 20s. Some people can happen before that. After that, there is only one possibility left, and that is at the higher end of the nervous system, that which, compared to the rest of them, would appear to be infinite. This. But is that happening? Well, of course, yes and no. People are better educated. People think they're pursuing more and more intellectual affairs, but do they? Is there anything going on right now? Let's take where we're living as a fair example of the avant-garde, or as well as anywhere on this planet, of man, the intellectual creature. Is there anything comparable going on at this end of the nervous system up here with people out, spending hours a night in gyms? Now, I'm not talking about now just guys named Bruno that's, pumping iron to the point that every time they drop it, the floor shakes. We're talking about nice, trim boys and girls out doing aerobics, spending hours out at that. And you have people spending hours, apparently, pursuing that which has some artistic interest on their part. But is there anything comparable? Is there any way, you can pump iron, you can use the barbells, and you can make your bicep bigger. Anybody can. It just happens. Is there anything comparable, not only available, but is there any interest? Does there seem to be any need for anything comparable to that here? Somewhat of an aside, although this is where things are headed, I'll get back to this in a second, I wanted to point out, because it's true in life, all over this planet, right here where we are, and it's true in you, that beyond all that, there are still genetic clusters. That is, other people, and in you, clusters. Your ancestors, you don't have to be Shintos, but some of you should know by now, your ancestors. You don't have to go and try to visit the graves. There's nowhere to go. Don't worry about ghost stories or I hear voices. You're damn right you hear voices. But at any rate, there are clusters. There are genetic, cellular, living, talking clusters on this planet, right here, amongst us, amongst you, that are still pursuing the hungers, the needs that I started out liming closer to the lower, more proper to the lower areas of the nervous system. What would appear just to be the hungers and the needs of the body, if we could separate the body absolutely from any sort of human emotion, much less human intellect, which we can't, but we can talking, can't we? You're damn right. We just did. There are still clusters all over this planet and all over you, or somewhere in you, that are still pursuing the lower needs and hungers. Well, such as just out-and-out sex. And I was just going to give you a string of things, and for you people on tape, these are not, I don't list them, or I don't mention them in some pejorative sense. I'm just pointing out that there are still people that the need, they're thinking of change. What seems to be their itching is the scratching is attempted still on no more level than, just sex, pursuit of money, prestige, fame, looking better, plastic surgery, working out, all of the things that some parts of the nervous system, even at the ordinary level, when you get up here, begin to question. But the very things that you should be able to see do not bring about a certain kind of change that many people dream about. But there are people still out there doing it. And I repeat, there's still parts of you, if you belong here, that at times, insofar as thinking important, high-range, otherworldly thoughts, if it's between that, I wonder if I could pick that girl up over there. You know, there's not much of a choice. That kind of thing. Or do I want to have some sort of almost otherworldly, brand new intelligence? Or would I like to be rich as a bitch? I don't know. I hope I don't ever have to face that. That kind of thing. The aside I wanted to point out, that is still going on, and it's not that they are, in some more multidimensional sense, anachronistic. They are fulfilling, if it's out there or if it's in you. But if it's in you, of course, we got a different eventual comment to make about it, or you should. But anyone doing that is not behind the times. They are not in some way to be pitted or to be scolded or to criticize, because they are still fulfilling a need. But they have yet to work out the lower circuit roles. And I don't mean just them individually. There's parts of life that still needs that. The only thing I'm trying to point out to you is everyone is also built to have that critical element. That is part of the desire, the feeling that things should be changed. Is not just me, that is you, but also everybody else. Because for one thing, it'd be easier for you to change if the rest of them would change and straighten up. It'd just make it easier on you, because you wouldn't have to spend so much time worrying about trying to straighten them out and etc. So it is not, if you see people that apparently have no important thoughts, or if they do, they keep them hidden, right? It is not that those people are off on some absolutely fallacious trek of their own. They are still serving needs. But from one view, and it's, don't take this personally, because and especially people might be getting this for the first times on tape sometime. I'm not referring to any sort of karma or anything spiritual and none of that. But I'm saying, as exemplified by these individuals, it's still part of life that is working out. The needs are still there to fill the lower hungers. And there are people who are apparently are driven, that their whole thing of change is, I just need more sex. Different sex. I need more money. Whatever I got's not enough. I need more money. And many times after that, well, I want somebody to recognize me for having a lot of money. In other words, I want to be famous now. And so from some views, especially people who believe that they're involved with some kind of spiritual interest, you know, the religions for years, institutionalized mysticism and corporate mythology for years, throughout history, has condemned that. Like, boy, those people don't know what they're doing. They're far from this great spiritual or intellectual trek. Yeah, they're as far away as your damn end of your nervous system, your pelvis region. That's how far they are. They don't realize it. That's why apparently the more anti that somebody is, such as a priest, the more they vehemently denounce it. And it's not just get thee away from me, Satan. What they're trying to say, if they're religious, is they're really talking their own. You know, they're trying to tell their pelvis, you know, get away from me, get away, get away. But everybody needs a hobby. There's one that'll keep you busy the rest of your life, I guess. At one time, I guess I might have thought that the most, if not vacuous, at least the most continuing hobby would be trying to avoid your own shadow. But I guess that could be to just try to get away from your own nervous system. But anyway, to do this kind of stuff also, while I'm still on this side, you do surely have some recognition or suspicion of the fact that you have, in some way adequate to you, you have got to have done God over done kind of worked out. I know these are technical terms, but you can look them up later. Those kind of lower, cruder ancestral activities. It doesn't mean that you're giving up sex or giving up making a profit in your line of work, but insofar as any of the ancestral, any of the lower areas, including the ordinary intellect, as I was going to get to in a second, as you should already suspect, but the pursuit of any of those, you being driven, you personally already wired up to be driven and still at all be deluded into thinking that that will go somewhere, that sex will go somewhere besides sex. Now, God forbid it would, but ordinary people, well, they do. That's part of the old rituals of people believing. That life has made people believe that there are ways that you could pursue these kind of older activities and they would in some way begin to transcend themselves, that they would blossom out into something else. That's been going on for thousands of years. It's going on right this second, under all kinds of guises, from religious to psychological, or from, I guess, New Age cum psychological nowadays, or vice versa, that you can take quite ordinary affairs, and sex is about as ordinary and common denominator to humanity, good and physical, sweaty, gritty, but in some way you could turn it into an enlightening experience. This is an aside to an aside. I've often wondered, people that believe that, what kind of sex has life let them have that they want it even better? Because I would suggest there's some people around that would say, if there's somebody to make it better, I think I'll pass right now until I get in better shape. So I'm sure I won't have some sort of serious blowout. But at any rate, what I was going to say is you have to, an individual, somebody here or there, has got to have already, in some way, gone past the feeding that would be quite necessary, quite natural at your lower regions of the kinds of things I mentioned. Is you've got to be past that and ready to do something else, which is still, as I pointed out, it would seem to be theoretically that which awaits everybody now, especially those that are even just mechanically already living in this part of life's nervous system, that is, where the intellect is of more and more consequence, and yet where they're going to turn, what is there available. But to do this, even individually, even if you had nowhere to turn and you had no name for it, you would have to be past the point that you could actually be captivated by believing that any of the older, cruder, no matter how enjoyable they are, no matter how necessary they are, such as sex, on a primary level or even on a secondary level nowadays of wanting to be famous. That is a necessary secondary activity of humanity. But you individually, a person individually, to pursue such as this, has got to be some way past that, not through disappointment and not through, well, hell, I'm not going to play. I gave them a chance to let me be famous. Nobody paying attention, so hell with them. No. It's just that you've got to understand that that's one game, that is one activity, it is one form of energy, and it does not lead to what you're looking for. Even if you don't know what it is, you've got to be the point that you understand that's not it. It's not that it's wrong, any more than it's wrong or that the people are wrong who are out pursuing that. It's necessary. But it will not take you, some people, where they itch. Back to the more general contemporary drive of man's nervous system being activated, being centralized more and more in the higher regions, rather than my little aside there. Now let's talk about, back to where we were, ordinary, sophisticated, educated men and women, our day, our time, here, Western Europe, many parts of the world, but 20th century man and woman. And assuming that the body, the organism that I have in mind, that I'm speaking of, this individual, fairly healthy, no great vices, just up to date, tries to live by the Playboy philosophy or the Red Book philosophy or cosmopolitan, whatever, Just a good, up-to-date, with it, hip, sophisticated, chillin', fresh, whatever else the latest term, person is. Somebody with some talents. Just a good, with it person. Cellular phones and everything. You know. Now, what I wanted you to just directly confront, which is not all that strange, but more and more they are having to confront this. Life is driving at such a pace that more and more people, without any particular way to describe it as of yet, but they're faced with this. That is, that the lower regions, they have about, as is proper for them, as is pertinent and necessary, they have about fulfilled. They have about got their muscles, if they're men, I guess, as big as they're going to get. If they're women, they have about trimmed down their thighs, their waist. They've had some small plastic surgery, whatever they have about done. Let's say physically, they have about done all that they're ever going to do or can afford to do. You can call it anything you want to, but what it is they have fulfilled, in a sense, that which was pertinently wired into them genetically at the physical level. And if we're going to talk about emotion, let's say they have done all they're going to do. They went to an analyst for a while. They went to some support groups. They have done that which was pertinent for a good 20th century playboy person or cosmopolitan girl or whatever description. They have done that. And what's left now, whether they look at this way or not, is moving up to here. You're not going to get the muscles any bigger, that particular person. They could, but they're not going to. They're not going to pursue ordinary psychology or some New Age religion, or they're not finally going to move to Japan and go into a Zen monastery as they dreamed of for years. They finally ran across some people living in San Francisco that came from a monastery, and they went there and stayed about an hour, maybe 5 minutes, and for some reason lost all interest, that sort of thing. So they have done all that was going to be pertinent for them. They have reached that level. And so if anything else is going to happen, if their individual balloon is going to expand anywhere, it's not going to be in toto with them, although it is, and you can't see it, but it's not going to be in toto. It's, you're talking about now the weak point. Remember my little glove filled up with goo, and you mash it, and it's that one little place. The only place that they've got to go is here. Here's what they are faced with, that there is no amount, no form of reason, logic, education, non-sequential strengthening that will produce in them any form of a new intellectual function. It's always been true, but it's now to the point that ordinary people are being pushed closer and closer to being able to consider this matter. That is, they might even be able to hear a little bit of it. That education, again, if we're using my example of this prime man or woman with all the interests, abilities, fulfillments, ordinary level of development, and still the hunger that I have made up for you. If I said, this is where you've got to go, there are many people now go, you're right, that's it, yeah, no doubt about that. And then if I say, well, what are we going to do? I feel the same way. What are we going to do? They don't know. You know, if they started babbling, say, well, I've been thinking about going back to school. Now, there are more and more people that if I say, wait a minute, has it ever struck you, it just struck me, I don't know before, that just going to school, as much fun as it can be, and even going into areas that I seem to have had no great interest in at one time, that doesn't seem to really do that. There are more and more people that here and there will go, that's true. That's weird, isn't it? Yeah. But there is neither any form of thinking at the ordinary level, of reason, of logic, of trying to in some way strengthen, that's what I meant by sequential thinking. There is no form to take ordinary thought, no matter how high would seem to be the level under ordinary conditions. There is no way to pump iron up here at the ordinary level and make that thing move to another level. You could certainly, I'll say this, it's no importance, improve your memory. You could memorize more facts, and you could go into areas that you've never had any interest in, and you could begin to memorize facts, or you could go take courses. And you could say, well, I have strengthened the mind, but you have strengthened where it was. In the same way, you should see that there is no amount, to make it obvious, there is no amount of literal, physical pumping of iron, lifting weights, that will in any way affect the ordinary intellect, that will make you smarter just in the ordinary sense. There is no way that you can take the attempt to strengthen ordinary thought, ordinary reason, logic, sequential thought, even if it can be strengthened, if it can be exercised, if it can. It won't do what people expect it to do. There is a kind of built-in frustration, even if they have some passing awareness that what I am trying to scratch now is no longer my body, no longer my physical appearance, and is no longer my emotional makeup. I'm no longer that worried about what I thought was the traumas of childhood and blah, 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 and what people think of me. There's somewhere else I'm trying to itch, and now that you mention it, it is. It's like I want more understanding, or I want some insight into life. But even after having some passing awareness of that, or even if they had the ability to say, yes, that's true, if it was pointed out to them, they're left with this. Now what? What's next? And there is no answer. Because you surely should see, not many of you laugh, so I'll assume it was so obvious that we could pass on, but you do understand there is no amount of running, no amount of weightlifting, just at the ordinary level, will make one more intelligent. It is just a case that you're working on part of the circuits of the body, and you can continue to exercise and get stronger and have more resiliency and etc., but it is not going to directly make you smarter, nor will it make you, if you had a small amount of talent to play the sousaphone, or even a decent instrument. No amount of running, no amount of aerobics will make you more proficient on that most unglamorous but interesting of instruments. When you move up another, or expand that just a little bit, there is no amount even of anything ordinarily available and known that would apparently be the way to feed, to strengthen, to exercise the intellect that will make that quantum move into, ooh, I found it. Oh, you're just not. How non-sequential can you be? Well, do you follow? Back to the lower levels. If you were wired and primed up that somewhere along your life that you decide, I do not like the way I look, I'm too out of shape, I'm too fat, I don't know what it is, and just the whole ambiance of contemporary sophisticated life got you to the point that you changed your diet, you joined up with a gym, you dropped weight, and you got stronger, you trimmed down yourself, and you look better. There's a point past which people are not going to go. The need was fulfilled. Then let us say that you decide, well, I'm proud of what I've done. I like that. It's yesterday's news. Not because I say it, it is to the person. Then what'll I do? Well, I feel so much better. In fact, it makes me more aware, it kind of stands up by contrast, of how depressed I get at times. And I guess I was thinking that my depression was caused by me being such a fat slob. But now I've lost weight. I do feel better. There's no doubt about that. I feel better about myself. But now sort of the contrast is even worse. The times I do feel depressed for no reason. I can't say I'm depressed now because I'm a fat slob. What is it? I need to find out. So then they work on what would appear to be the limbic part of the nervous system. Their emotions, they work on that. But there's a point past which they're not going any further. Nobody is. But it seemed to. That is, that there was something available. There was a gym available. There are aerobic classes available that they seem to have satisfied. And when I say seemed, I don't mean they're deluded. They were, as far as they're concerned, whether they describe it that way or not. They got satisfied. The need for them to change themselves, the need for a new piece, for something missing, at the strictly physical level, they did it. It's not that they could not have gotten stronger, thinner, but they reached the point that that was it. I am full. Then they, let us say, moved on and tried to work on what seemed to be their emotional life, that they wanted to be a better person. They wanted to have a cleaner personality. They wanted to feel better about themselves internally, not just externally in the way I look. But they will only do that to a certain point, and they're satisfied. What I'm saying is, at those two levels, the need does have the food, the means available. It's as near as the YMCA. It's as near as Richard Simmons, if you could catch him out of bankruptcy court. Anyway, who are the latest is? The hunger is there and the need's there. All right, now the hunger is more and more people are aware of that this is what I'd like to work on. And there seems to be food there, right? They're down to most sophisticated cosmopolitan areas. I guess they're at least junior colleges on, figuratively speaking, every other corner. But that pursuit of ordinary education, of apparently strengthening the ordinary intellect, sequential thought, reason, logic, as much fun as it can be, if you needed it, it will not reach the point of satisfying that in the same way that pumping iron, losing weight, doing aerobics seems to satisfy the built-in intrinsic hunger to the individual physically. Do you not find that interesting? Or does that make some of you mad at the injustice of life? If so, we'll take a short break and you may leave. Be mad on your own time. See if you can tell if whether I changed the subject or not. Well, let's pretend I did. And then see if we can't all trick ourselves, and right toward the end here in the next few minutes, we'll play, I guess, Gomer Pyle of surprise, and see if the subject has not, after all, been non-changed. Sequentially it has, but so what? I was going to point out that there's a particular way that you could look at the structure of the intellect of ordinary people. In a way that it probably has never been pictured in this way, but it could be what we're talking about, sort of. But wait a minute, we'll find out. I could be wrong. I guess we'll have to press on and find out. You could look upon ordinary man's ordinary knowledge as being kind of exterior walls. In fact, if you're good, it's more than that. It's the flying buttresses. You know what those were? It's of a structure that is the knowledge, not internal columns, pillars, beams of the structure itself, but that which is acquired, that which is the ordinary level of ordinary intelligence, is the very least is like exterior walls. But those of you that didn't know, the flying buttress is even better, because the structure, the good Gothic architecture, would not have stood. Some structures still probably wouldn't stand under certain conditions, and if they did not use some variation. But the flying buttress, of course, they made it look, and it's now considered to be, attractive. But the point was, they were then going up so high, the building materials and the expertise they had coming out of the Dark Ages was such that they began to collapse and fall on themselves. And somebody had this brilliant idea that if we go outside the exterior walls and like put up another faux wall, just put up some pillars out there and tie it in from outside there, we can keep going just about as high as we want to. And they went, woo! And I'm sure it took somebody from there 2 or 3 minutes with anybody with any artistic ability to go, well, hey, in fact, instead of just driving poles or something out there, we'll fancy it up, make it like it's part of the building, like it was something, we'll put scrolls on it, and they did. But from one view, does everybody follow that without being going into any course in architecture? That those kinds of Notre Dames, all the great cathedrals at that time, they would not stand. They would not stand today if you took down the flying buttresses. But from one view, the flying buttress was an appendage. It was a secondary. That somebody sat down, let us say, and did Chartres or Notre Dame. They drew it out, and that's the way it should look. And everybody went, wow. And then they say, hey, we just heard about somewhere, it was over in England. They built one of these, they were over there building a cathedral, and they got up to X amount of 80 feet, and the damn thing fell and killed a bunch of them. And so then they said, well, what can we do? So the thing is, when they came up with the flying buttress, that was not part of the original design. That's what I'm trying to get you to see, back and forth, remember, as always, from metaphor to real bricks and mortar of the cathedrals, but back and forth as fast as you can go simultaneously. From one very real view, the flying buttress is really a secondary, add-on, aftermarket. And from one view, let us say that one guy, let's just say one guy had this sudden great moment of epiphany, and he saw the full structure of Notre Dame, the greatest piece of human architecture at that time. And yet, they had to point out to him, hey, they're finding out every day, the way you suddenly came up with that, the height, that thing will not stand. He went, oh, rats. Because it looks so neat. And they went, we agree. And that guy said, wait a minute, what if we ran up some anyway, so in a few minutes they come up with the flying buttress. The thing is, let us say that the guy who had the original idea and the plan, he went, well, I don't like it, but here's what he's left with. All right, if we do this, maybe they play around with some scale models and they decide this will probably work. If it doesn't, or if we don't even try it, your Notre Dame will not go up. So then he's left with sort of, well, all right. We'll fancy it up and make it. Nobody has to know. Maybe they all say, look, we don't even have to admit that we had to do this. We can play like it's part of your design. Keep playing with it tonight over the weekend. Get you a six-pack and keep playing. And make it look like it was kind of organic that was grown into. Can you see that the ordinary knowledge that ordinary people have at that level can be seen? That let's take everything that you know, which I'm fixing to move it in from just the intellect into intellect dash personality, but take it as it is a structure. It seems to be you, not just the information you have, not just the courses you took when you went to college or whatever you got your degree in, but everything that is you, your opinions, your political persuasions, everything would seem to be a structure. But there is a way in which you can look at the ordinary structure of the intellect is almost having no internals. It is almost a silhouette of itself. It is almost just a shell of a structure. It's not an attack on people, it's just the way it is, but it's almost as though you have got flying buttresses, and you have to look at, or you are wired up and primed to look at, those kind of exterior walls, and even flying buttresses, and marvel at, my God, what must be inside that cathedral. And yet, those that can make such explorations, which is what this is about, I suggest you go inside and the damn thing's almost empty. Literally. Which I might suggest to you is what seems to be somewhat of the difficulty, for instance, that humanity, and particularly nowadays, that psychologies, psychiatry, philosophers throughout the ages, I would suggest they seem to have a continuing, shall we say, a certain amount of difficulty of actually coming up with, what makes man tick? What's actually going on in here? Do you? Well, obviously, enough of you do from the sound of this reaction. It's not sarcasm, and it's not an untoward, it's not an unfounded picturization that not only the structure of the human intellect, but if you took that into, which is also fair, the intellect, the formation of the intellect is the formation of your personality. Or if that gets too viscid for you, without your intellect, you or anybody, you've got no personality. I mean, hell, you're just, you're like a Republican or something. I don't know. An insurance sales. No. There is a structure that would seem to be the human personality. It is impossible for such to exist without the forming and the informing of an intellect at the ordinary level. And to ordinary people, what I'm saying and hinting at right now, of course, is absolute heresy and unprovable, theoretical, dreamy, otherworldly. And yet it's not. Because if you can move outside your own little Notre Dame, or if that's getting too high class for some of you, your own little adobe, your own little shack, your own little mobile home that is yours, if you can move away from that side at all, it's not theoretical to believe that you're looking at, back metaphorically of course, at Notre Dame. You know, everybody's seen the photographs of son of a gun. Evidently you could spend months just walking around the outside looking at everything in there but just look at that. Does somebody even have to hint at the glories, the magnificence, the intricacies that must be inside? Because this is the outside, but what if inside there's nothing? You would never suspect it, and it certainly couldn't be proven. You couldn't even make somebody imagine it. All you got to do is be able to get away from your own ordinary level of the intellect operating to find out. Which is always, when you find out stuff, I can always throw this back at you and say, boy, if what I'm hinting to you is true, wouldn't that explain a lot? Not theoretically, but if you could suddenly get away and real quick, in a real, at least three-dimensionally speaking, unnatural way, that you could suddenly go, and turn around and look right into your own intellectual / personality structure, and you realize it did not amount to much more than the silhouette that you see, the flying buttresses, maybe some of the exterior walls, but that you look inside for all the unconscious motivations, all of the ambiguous, conflicting feelings. Well, just all of the general depths and complexity that all ordinary people say is man, which is why we can't explain man. I hate to tell them, or I'll tell you people, anything that seems to be reasonable at the 3D level, now you know this by now, we'll all repeat it, the opposite is just as reasonable. So, man is so complex, that covers it. Man is so complex, we can never intellectually, we can never in this lifetime, we can never from our own level ever explain man. He is just too complex. All right. Do you not see that flies just as well? And I'm not being funny. That just the opposite is true. He can't be explained because if you look in there, there's nothing much to explain. Yeah, but there's this appearance of everything, right? Yeah. You've been explaining that for years. Yeah, but it doesn't satisfy us. Well, so what does that prove? Well, it proves that there's something missing. Okay. And where is it missing? Well, obviously inside. It's too complex. Yeah, you got me again. See, by then, they're already back on the track. The magnetism of life has already pulled them back to, well, yes. That what I was beginning to hint at, thankfully, has left the scope of their investigation. It is not unfair, and is certainly not unrewarding, to consider that the structure that seems to be ordinary intelligence in ordinary people, and it doesn't matter what the education level is, that's not the point, because if I'm going to continue this paradigm, well, at least I didn't say burlesque, I mean barley is what I meant to say, that you could look upon higher degrees of education as being more of external pediments, curlicues, gorgoles, inscriptions, that a more educated man, that his structure, his flying buttresses could be a lot fancier than a man who dropped out of school at the 8th grade. No doubt about that. But it is not unfair for me to suggest to you that the ordinary structures that pass for human intelligence, that are human intelligence at the ordinary level, are more like exterior walls at best, and at the outside, I guess pun intended since everybody else would say no pun intended, is flying buttresses, and that the actual internals, such as internal pillars, columns, holding you up from the inside, I suggest you could be at a minimum, maybe almost non-existent. But there is also another way, at least that sounds like some sort of unbelievable attack in some way on ordinary intelligence, even if I'm correct, even if that picture is fair. You always left with this question, so what? Things are still moving right along. We're sending up rockets in outer space. We're replacing human faulty organs with things made out of old trombone parts and silly putty. In other words, life is going along swimmingly well, whether I point this out and whether it be a fair picture or not. But it is always, if it is a fair picture, if you could look and see it yourself, that you mean that everything operates on the basis, and even intelligence at the ordinary level, once I see it, and the reason you can't say much more about man or why man can't be explained is there's really nobody in there. Even if that's true, then you're left with suddenly that you realize the full implications of me saying, giving you that question of so what, you realize then so what in the real sense, and you can move on. Because then you've got to be able to move on and find a new building site intellectually. At the very least, this sort of thing, anything that you pick up through this kind of activity, at the very least, you could say that what you have gotten then is some sort of this new structure, let's say, that you are, to take my pictures again, that you have moved into a new area of your own neural landscape, and you have started building something new. Whatever it is, to you personally, at least, let me point this out, it has internal support, whatever the hell it is. And that's the only one, comparably speaking, because that which everyone is given by life itself can be seen to be almost just an outline of itself, almost a shadow puppet play that this is what intelligence is, this is what individuality is, that it's almost nothing but external walls and perhaps not much more than flying buttresses holding up walls that are not even walls. But anything that you do after the fact, anything that you can find out on your own now, no matter what it is, and it's nobody's business to put a name on it for you personally, but what it is you get, whatever it is, at least it's got internal supports because it came from the ground up. Well, let's just leave 15 or 20 seconds here on the tape, and it can just go blank and run out and give everybody time out there in TV land or anywhere else to reflect and meditate on this weighty subject.